A lot that needs to be done here. We need to make sure we have the most modern approach possible in the AG's office. You know, crime with technology is evolving very quickly. Our young people are, I'd say, more vulnerable than ever because of that. And as you know as well as I, they're online all the time and online at younger and younger ages. And if you don't have a 21st century AG's office that's up to speed in battling that crime, you will have problems. And you all know this, and you know, parents, I think, around the state. By the way, I'm a young parent of a 4-month-old. So obviously I'm thinking differently about safety of children than I ever have before because I have my own youngster at home. But you talk to parents and they're easily worried about what's happening online is on the street of their neighborhood when it comes to their kids' safety. That's easily, that in a way it's more of a mystery what's happening online than what they can see out on the street. And so we put into place a number of proposals. I'm friends with some attorney generals that are doing remarkable things when it comes to making sure online is as safe as possible for young people. We need to do more prevention there. We also mention here one of the areas, and there's a lot of talk in Ohio about the crime lab. And there are some good things happening and some not so good things happening. You know, I'm a believer that this whole process of testing old rape kits could be greatly accelerated. There are thousands all over the state right now not being tested. Mr. DeWine deserves credit for having started that testing. But I think that there's ways to dramatically improve the pace so that women who have been waiting for years don't have to wait years longer. But another area that I'm concerned about is the computer crime part of the office. And as you would guess, you know, computer evidence is more and more in demand. It's more and more can help prove crimes that are happening. Everything from videotapes to emails to text messages and all that. And if you look at the data here, you'll see that while more cases are being opened from the AG's office to examine computer evidence, they are not closing at any faster rate. And if we're going to keep up with the kind of crimes that happen against children, where that computer evidence is so important, we need to make sure this office is keeping up with that demand. And so we'll work very hard to make sure that happens. There are a couple other key areas. There's another program that's very important, and it's called the RAP-BAT program. And this is a program that it's supposed to provide, especially in child-serving industries, whether it be, let's say, school bus drivers or daycare workers or others, it does a background check on individuals who are in those industries to make sure that they are folks who we believe should be working with their kids and can do so safely. But then it also is supposed to provide up-to-date sort of updates if someone who is in one of those industries actually, you know, has a problem and somehow breaks the law. It's supposed to immediately update the system so that that employer knows this person who handles children in some way every day did something that should make us alarmed. And I don't have data here, but my understanding is that program could really use some improvements. That it's not as quick as it needs to be, it's not as well managed as it needs to be. So when I get to be Attorney General, I will quickly work to make sure that program is doing all it can do. And one other thing that I want to talk about before closing, or two quick things. One of them is the Attorney General happens to not just be the one enforcing the laws, also happens to be an office that is overseeing the nonprofits and charitable organizations in the state. And there are many fantastic youth-serving organizations that do unbelievable things. I was a mentor for years ago, Cincinnati Youth Collaborative. I was a mentor there. There's so many great organizations that do very important work. But if you talk to folks in the area of child abuse, those organizations sometimes can be the place where abusers go because they know they're going to interact with children. And so those organizations, they have such an important role to play. But they also need to appreciate that oftentimes they may be the place where the person we don't want to interact with children goes because they know that there are going to be children involved. And I think it's extra important that those organizations are following. You know, I've laid out a plan to make sure that our college campuses have best practices when it comes to sexual assault of young women on campuses. That's very important. And I think youth-serving organizations need to make sure that they understand the best practices about how to avoid having people who volunteer for those organizations or even work for them, how to avoid having scenarios occur where they may not even know that they're doing something that may put children at risk. You know, not allowing adults to ever be alone with one child with no one else around. How to make sure you're organizing your organization so that doesn't happen. I mean, there's a lot of best practices. Of course we have to, a lot of the point of this, by the way, of course we have to be tough after the crime has happened, and we always will be. And I expect with local law enforcement. But a lot of what the Attorney General can do is actually the more preventive side as well, and that's what I'm talking about here. Make sure that every youth-serving organization is armed with, and the Attorney General helps them understand all the positive things they could do, all the best practices to avoid being a place. And I'll be really honest, Penn State was a great example. That coach set up a youth-serving organization. It looked great on the surface for a few years. But that was all about him being the predator. And we need to make sure that we don't allow youth-serving organizations to fall into any bad practices that might put themselves and the kids they serve at risk. So we're going to obviously work on that. And that's something, because the Attorney General oversees nonprofits and charities in the state, it has a lot of leverage to make sure that very positive best practice work can happen. And finally, especially in the streets of our cities, gun violence is obviously an issue that is a concern to parents everywhere. And we are seeing too many young people caught in the crossfire. Too many, oftentimes, you know, some of the, let's say, teenage years are using guns or the victims of gun violence. Other times it's kids younger than that who are just caught in the crossfire. They're walking down the street. And there's a lot, you know, there's obviously a lot of difficult politics around gun policy. And I'm not in the legislature. I don't expect to see consensus on a lot of those debated issues in Ohio ever, probably, at least in the near future. But the Attorney General has a role to play, and that a whole lot of the gun violence in our community, and I dealt with this as a county commissioner, city council member, are actually people who are already violating gun laws. They are people who are felons in possession of a weapon. And if you track back most gun violence that we see, it's people who are committing it. They're already violating gun laws, and they're being arrested all the time for doing that. And I think this is something I worked on when I was on county commission with Hamilton County Commission, with a prosecutor, and the local Attorney General's office to make sure that we're with the laws that are already in place, that we're really enforcing them. And that if people are currently violating the gun laws, as they are all over our state, that we actually do all we can to prosecute them. And that's one of the things that we can do right now on gun violence, as well as some of the ways that guns are sold that violate the law right now. There's a lot the Attorney General can do there, and to the extent our young people are getting caught up in this violence and the victims of it, which I can tell you in Cincinnati, there's too many stories in the last year of young people who have been caught in the crossfire. Some have passed away, others injured for life. We obviously have to do a lot there. So these are some of my overarching thoughts on how this job can be much more aggressive in protecting children. And obviously I mentioned the charter school to start. That's a near-term crisis with the stories we've read lately. But all of these, I think, will really make a dent. And with that, I'll sit down and would love to just sort of field questions, input, hear your thoughts on what else is out there. We've laid out a lot of plans. If you're interested in them, oftentimes in these elections, people like to focus on the silly stuff. We've spent a lot of time focusing on the serious stuff. We've laid out a plan on the heroin crisis, especially given what we saw yesterday with this Ray Rice and NFL situation. We've laid out as good a plan as you'll ever see on how to tackle domestic violence in a comprehensive way. We've laid out how this office can protect voting rights. We've laid out how this office can push for new economy jobs, and also make sure we're enforcing the most basic labor laws like the minimum wage and not having worker misclassification. So look through any of our plans. We'd love your input. I was going to say, though, the good news is our plans are always evolving based on input. So if you have input today and you have other ideas, we'd love to start incorporating them in what we're doing. So thank you all very much. Appreciate the audience, and would love to just open up to a conversation.